I stumbled upon 3 terrifying true horror stories that left me questioning my sanity. I never should have opened that door. The moment my fingers brushed the cold, rusty handle, a chill shot through me. Something was wrong. Something was waiting. There I was, just an ordinary evening. I settled into my couch, the faint glow of my phone lighting up the room. The familiar hum of my favorite show was a comforting soundtrack. But that comfort was shattered. A low creak echoed from the hallway. Instinctively, my heart raced. The house was silent apart from that ominous sound. I shook my head, trying to banish the unease creeping into my bones. The air turned thick, almost suffocating. I could see shadows flickering against the wall like tortured spirits, shifting. A cold draft swept through the room, sending shivers down my spine. I glanced toward the hallway, a dark void that seemed to breathe. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just the wind. But deep down, I felt a heaviness, a sense of lurking dread. Then came the whispers. Quiet at first, like rustling leaves. But then they grew louder, more insistent, wrapping around my mind like a vine. My stomach nodded. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. But that silence felt charged, electric. I stood, hesitated, and took a step toward the noise. My breath hitched. I had to know. I had to see. As I moved closer, the air thickened. The whispers morphed into a word I couldn't quite catch. It sent a jolt of fear through me, and I stumbled backward, crashing into the coffee table. The bang echoed in the stillness. Furniture shifted, something was in there, hiding, waiting for me to make a mistake. I could almost feel its eyes on me. The shadows danced aggressively now, nothing more than dark figures shifting in the corners. I turned to escape the house, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, ensnared by an unseen force. My heart pounded in my chest as I made another attempt. I had to find the source of that whisper. Suddenly, a loud bang resonated from the hallway, rattling the very foundations of my home. I gasped. What was happening? Terror gripped me tight. My mind raced through the stories I'd heard. A ghost? A demon? My fingers trembled as I approached the door. It felt like a portal to something dark, a threshold I did not want to cross. With a deep breath, I yanked the door open. The darkness spilled out, swirling into the room like an angry storm. A figure lurked within, shrouded in shadow, its presence choking the air around me. I could barely breathe. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound never came. That I stood there, paralyzed, as the shape took a step forward, and everything went black. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I awoke on the floor, the chill of the tiles biting into my skin. Panic surged through me as I blinked into the darkness, disoriented. The shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own, throbbing in time with my racing heart. I pressed my palms against the cold surface, trying to gather my bearings. Where had that figure gone? Disorientated, I pushed myself to a sitting position, my breath hitching at the grip of despair tightening around my throat. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like blood. Whispers flitted around me, tying the edges of my consciousness like a fog I couldn't see through. You cannot escape, you cannot escape. I had to move. Adrenaline pumping, I shot to my feet, but my head spun. The hallway yawned before me, a sinister maw beckoning me closer. I glanced back at the safety of the living room, but the shadows there had deepened, wrapping around the furniture like creeping tendrils. I couldn't turn back. Something was waiting for me closer in the dark. With each step toward the entrance of the long corridor, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Come, join us." It was hard to tell if they were coming from the darkness ahead or from within my own racing mind. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, yet my feet carried me forward like I was being pulled by invisible strings. The hallway felt endless, a black tunnel with walls that writhed as though they were alive. My fingers brushed against the peeling wallpaper, the texture rough and clammy. It felt like cold sweat, like 1,000 hands trying to clutch me. Just as I reached the doorway at the end, a sudden rush of freezing air slammed against me, pushing me back, and for a fleeting moment, guilt washed over me. I felt I had disturbed something ancient, something that ought not to be awakened. That I paused to catch my breath, the long shadows stretching around me, mocking my fear. Then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed a faint glow seeping through a crack in a door slightly ajar. It flickered like a candle flame, beckoning me closer. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I crept toward it, my every instinct telling me to turn away. The whispers morphed again into a soft chant, intermingling with the flickering light. It felt hypnotic, enticing. "Join us in darkness." Let go. A surge of excitement mixed with dread ignited in my chest. I had to see what lay beyond that door. As I slowly pushed it open, the stillness deepened. The small room inside was packed with old furniture and photographs that appeared to have aged a century. Each picture depicted a face, their eyes eerily alive, watching me with an intensity that sent a shiver rippling through my spine. Their mouths seemed to betray whispers of secrets lost in time. Suddenly, the light flickered violently and blinked out. Darkness swallowed the room, and I stumbled backward, heart racing. The sound of soft rustling filled the air, the whispers now sharpened into shrieks full of pain. Panic washed over me. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the very walls. "Let us in, let us out." The voices echoed around me, desperate and pleading yet full of malice, draining warmth from the space. I pressed against the door, pushing with all my might, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like the walls themselves were closing in, suffocating me with their presence. In an instant, the light flickered back to life. I turned, my breath hitching painfully as I faced the room, but I was no longer alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, pale, shimmering outlines of those trapped in the photographs. Their mouths moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but their eyes told an agonizing truth. They were begging for help, yet begging for something darker. The chilling realization swept over me: they weren't just victims, they were the allure of this horror, its curators. As one of them stepped closer, the intensity of its stare pierced through me. Time froze. I could feel its icy breath wrapping around my neck, suffocating me. Just before I could scream, the floor beneath my feet gave way, and I plummeted into the darkness below, and then, as I tumbled through the endless void, everything went silent. The sense of weightlessness shattered as I found myself sprawled on a cold, damp surface, a flickering overhead light distorting my surroundings into jagged shadows. I blinked rapidly, trying to gather my senses, heart thudding furiously in my chest. The silence that enveloped me was thick enough to slice through, yet an unsettling energy prickled at the back of my neck. That I was in another room, one markedly different from the earlier one. The walls were bare, save for stains that abstractly resembled outstretched hands clawing at the surface, as if someone had tried to escape from within. Faint scraping sounds flitted in the distance, drowning amid the whispered echoes of the figures above, their urgent murmurs rising in a chorus of despair. The floor was strewn with remnants of broken furniture and scattered debris. I scrambled to my feet, instincts screaming at me to find a way out, while a gut-wrenching fear cautioned me to stay silent. As I glanced back, the light buzzed and flickered, casting distorted shadows that danced like twisted marionettes across the walls. The familiar chilling chant resumed, crashing into my ears with enticing tendrils of terror. "Join us." Let go. A muffled thud vibrated from a corner ahead, pulling my attention. My eyes widened when I discerned a figure slumped against the wall, draped in a dark shroud that enveloped it like a funeral veil. Approaching cautiously, I held my breath as I neared it. The darkness parted just enough to reveal the pained features of a woman. Her face was contorted, ghostly and hollow, yet her eyes were vibrant and shockingly alert, like twin lanterns swallowed by night. "What are you doing here?" she rasped, her voice a ghostly whisper that shattered the silence around us. "You shouldn't have come. You woke them." That I stumbled back instinctually, heart racing at the weight of her words. Who?" I stammered, gut twisting at the implication swelling between us. The moment my gaze landed on her outstretched hand, I noticed her fingers curling as though beckoning. An unseen force tugged at me, blending dread with an unwelcome curiosity. "There's no escape." A tremor of hopelessness invaded her tone, and her eyes darted to the shadows looming in the corners, palpable fear etched across her features. "They will come for you. They are always watching." Just then, a low growl reverberated through the air, gaining strength with every passing moment. I turned to discern the source, heart racing. Lofty silhouettes began to emerge, growing larger and inching closer. Wisps of darkness snaked toward me, lurching into lengthened forms that dripped with malevolence. I could feel them hunger for my fear. "You must run," the woman insisted, eyes frantic. "You only have." Before she could finish, the grown force erupted, consuming her in a swirl of shadow, flesh evaporating into the air like smoke. I staggered back. No. No. This wasn't happening. I spun on my heel, launching myself toward the opposite end of the room, desperate to find any semblance of an exit. The walls seemed to close in around me, pulsating with life, and I could feel the breath of the shadows hot against my back. Frantically tearing through the chaos, I tripped and fell, sprawling onto the floor. My palms landed in a vile substance that squelched blood, unmistakable and warm even as chill crept through me. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to my knees, and that's when I saw them, 10 figures, pale as the moonlight and just as haunting, lined up along the wall, drawn closer with each heartbeat. Their mouths didn't move, yet the whispering crescendo grew louder, begging for my presence, hunting for my fear, pulling me toward their dark embrace. That I, in a sudden moment of clarity, I saw their faces twisted with grief and madness, the same faces from the photographs, trapped in a loop of despair. They were not victims, they had become the very essence of this wretched place, their souls tied to it like shackled prisoners. With a surge of adrenaline, I launched myself toward what appeared to be a door at the far end. The wood seemed to hum with energy, fiercely pulsating like a living heart. As I gripped the handle, the temperature plummeted and the quietude erupted into a climactic roar of whispers. Join us," but just as I thrust the door open, I froze. A figure loomed in the entrance, tall, slender, and clad in dark rags that fluttered like restless spirits. Its eyes burned like coals, locking onto mine with an intensity that paralyzed me, amplified by the echoing screams of the trapped souls around me. "You shouldn't have come," it hissed, the words dripping with despair and hunger. As the world shifted and the shadows roared, it lunged forward, and with one desperate, defiant scream, I was consumed by darkness once more. As the darkness enveloped me, a cold chill shot through my body, as if ice had woven itself into my very bones. I felt myself suspended in an abyss, a void devoid of sound or light. Panic clawed at my throat, and I gasped, struggling against the oppressive weight. Then, in a blink, the shadows released their grip, and I was thrust into a new reality that shimmered with menacing clarity. The smell of decay hit me first, a gruesome miasma that wrapped around my spirit like a suffocating cloak. I stumbled to my feet on a warped surface, slick and uneven, and as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I understood where I was. An enormous underground chamber awaited me, its great stone walls adorned with grotesque carvings that seemed to writhe and contort under my gaze. They depicted countless figures in torment, their mouths agape in silent screams that resonated within the cavernous space. That I dared to take a step forward, only to yelp as something cold and slimy brushed against my ankle. Looking down, I recoiled, and horror-thick trails of what resembled dark ink pooled on the ground, swirling into grotesque patterns before converging into a mass that slithered away. I followed it with my eyes, dread coiling tightly in my stomach. The mass moved, pulsating and writhing, as if it were alive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was aware of me. The only light in this wretched chamber came from a few dim torches strategically placed along the walls, their flames flickering erratically and casting long shadows that danced ominously. In the silence, the whispers returned, their seductive tones brushing against my consciousness, offering false promises of solace. "Stay with us, you belong here." I shook my head violently, willing myself to breathe, to think. I summoned the image of the woman's terrified eyes, her warning echoing within, urging me to escape this torment. But where? Panic surged again as I saw a doorway at the far end, beckoning me with the faintest hint of dawn. Yet the shadows were stirring, their forms becoming tangible, grotesque figures sculpted from the very essence of despair and sorrow. Driven by sheer instinct, I sprinted toward the exit, my heart hammering like a war drum in my chest. As I neared the door, a screech erupted, tearing through the oppressive quieta clash of distress and malice. I turned just in time to witness the figures coalesce, their twisted bodies merging and splitting apart with brutal efficiency. They clawed at the air, mouths stretching wider than seemed possible, and a chorus of chilling laughter echoed in response to my flight. Just when my fingers grazed the doorknob, I felt something icy wrap around my wrist, yanking me back with fierce strength. I stumbled, crashing to the stone floor, gasping as I turned to see a face leering down at me, its features flat and featureless except for two glowing blue eyes that pierced through the abyssal darkness. "You will not leave," it said, voice an otherworldly rasp that vibrated in the marrow of my bones. "You are ours now, entwined in our endless eternal night." Fear surged through my veins like wildfire. I pulled away, but it only tightened its grip, pulling me closer, tightening its tendrils around my mind. The whispers became a cacophony, drowning me in a sea of despair, dragging me down into the depths where hope withered like a dying ember. In that moment, a sudden realization splintered through the chaos: the fabric of this grim reality was unraveling. The shadows flickered, paused, and then began to recede, a momentary lapse in their insatiable hunger. The figures around me hesitated, their laughter dying down as the dark tremors of the chamber pulsated, rapidly descending into a foreboding hush. With a fierce surge of desperation, I tore myself free, rolling away from the suffocating grasp. I lunged for the door once more, the fervor of survival igniting my every muscle. The shadows writhed and reached for me, but I threw myself through the threshold, crashing into another abyss, this one filled with a piercing light that stung my eyes. Before I could even catch my breath, I heard a deep, simmering growl emanating from the darkness I had narrowly escaped, reverberating through the air around me. "You're not free yet." As the light flickered and faded, darkness began to creep at the edges of my vision, and panic set in once more. On the floor in front of me lay something glinting, an object, an artifact left behind. I reached for it, feeling the thrill of possible salvation, only to hear a voice from behind me, low and taunting: "Turn around and face what you've become." Frozen, I hesitated, my heart racing with dread. Holding the artifact tightly, I turned slowly, the shadows re-emerging like a tidal wave determined to engulf me once more. The chamber around me was empty, but I could feel the presence of dread lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for its moment. The artifact in my hand felt unnaturally cold, pulsating as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Its surface was tempered glass, encased in intricate bronze filigree that twisted elegantly, resembling the forms of serrated thorns. Yet, there was a vivid red stain creeping along its edges, disconcerting and glistening just faintly in the fading light. As I clutched it tighter, flashes of horror flooded my mind, images of the grotesque figures flailing in anguish, their tortured faces locked in silent screams that reverberated in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting to suppress the waves of nausea threatening to engulf me. "What am I becoming?" I whispered, the thought twisting in my gut like a blade. The taunting voice carried an echoing weight. "You hide from your purpose. Embrace who you are." Behind me, the growl turned into a low, rumbling murmur, a sound at once familiar and deeply unsettling, belonging to a nightmare that had yet to fully manifest. I felt the shadows swallowing the flickering light around me, transforming it into a chilling twilight that pressed against my skin, sending shivers down every vertebra. The chamber shifted then, walls trembled, inscribed carvings flashed, and I saw them animated, a depiction of a ceremony steeped in dark ecstasy. Beings cloaked in twilight glory held aloft a sacrifice, a figure bound in chains of bone bindings. Their eyes glowed red, mirroring the artifact in my palm. My own breaths became frantic, suffocating within the constricting aura of horror. "I want join you." I shouted into the void, my defiance trembling against the encroaching darkness, yet even as I yelled, a chilling thought slithered into my mind. What if this was not a choice? I blinked quickly, urging rational thought to dispel the oppressive nightmare, but the sensation of the floor shifting beneath me proved my instincts wrong. I was not standing still, I was sinking into a swirling mass of shadows, each wispy tendril grazing my legs, their cold touch sending shockwaves through my sanity. Suddenly, the artifact ignited with blinding light, a shockwave that illuminated the chamber for a heartbeat, blasting away the shadows that clung to my skin. In that moment of clarity, I glimpsed an enormous figure emerging from the void, its presence spellbinding yet horrifying. Tall, impossibly thin, it was adorned with misty chains that rattled ominously with every step. Piercing azure eyes, like the ones I had seen before, bored into my soul, leaving me paralyzed. As it approached, the whispers grew louder, clamoring for attention like ravenous beasts. "You are chosen, child," it intoned, voice deep and caressingly sinister. "Your fate entwines with ours. This artifact, though you not recognize its power." My heart hammered wildly within my chest as the shadows swirled around the figure, spiraling like trapped smoke, yet it remained unbothered, propelling towards me with an eerie grace. "Join us, and you will find your true self." That I, in a moment of desperation, doubt mingled with dread, and I could feel my grip loosening around the artifact. But a sudden urgency pulled at my core. Its light was my only defense, and letting go was not an option. I raised it higher, casting a bedazzling orb of luminescence directly at the spectral figure, piercing the churning darkness, daring it to recoil. "What is left of your free will?" it hissed, and in that instant, the shadows clawed at the tendrils of light, every whisper dying down to a static hush. I felt my heart thundering as the figure halted in its tracks, the moment stretching into agony as the light battled with the encroaching night. Just then, a presence erupted from the depths of the darkness, pulling me back with a sudden force. The hairs on my neck stood on end as a hand grasped my shoulder, a touch cool and deliberate, sending a jolt of panic through my entire being. "Run! You're running out of time!" a voice shouted, thin and brittle with terror from behind, breaking through the quiet. It was the voice of the woman from my past. Her eyes danced across my memory, filled with fierce urgency. That I spun around to confront the source of her voice, but all I saw was unfolding shadows cascading from the far wall like tendrils of despair reaching out to ensnare me. The barrier between light and dark was relentless, and I felt myself being tugged in both directions between salvation and despair, the inevitable collision offering no hint of victory. And as the figure lunged towards me, a twisted smile spreading across its desiccated face, I could only scream. The artifact slipped from my grasp and shattered to the floor, the echoes of its demise drowning out all sound. The darkness roared, a choir of voices crying out my name. You cannot escape what you are destined to become. In that moment, everything erupted into chaos, shadows spilling forth and engulfing me in an embrace deeper than any horror I had ever known. My screams faded into the abyss, and a single chilling thought hung in the stale air, echoing endlessly. I had become a part of the darkness. The darkness held me, smothering and heavy, pressing down upon my very essence as I struggled to breathe. It twisted around my limbs, melding with the remnants of what I once was. The world beyond the shadows was a mere memory, flickering like a dying star, while the cacophony of cries spun tales of torment within my mind. Flashes of fleeting images darted before me like angry phantoms, faces I recognized yet could not place, trapped in their own spirals of helplessness. Their wide eyes shimmered with moisture, mouths agape in silent wails of despair. Yet their forms ebbed and flowed, blurring together as if they were but wisps of smoke intricately woven into this tapestry of supernatural terror. Desperation clawed at me, and I fought against the cold grip of the shadows, feeling my sanity unravel threads by agonizing threads. "Seek the void within." A voice screeched, resonating through the very fabric of the darkness, its timbre a mockery of compassion. I fell, unable to withstand the crushing weight, the cavernous void swallowing my pleas. For an instant, the shadows parted just enough for a sliver of light to flood in, illuminating a ghastly scene. The chamber was a canvas of malevolence, and I could barely process what lay before me. That it was a place of untold anguish. Twisted figures writhed and squirmed, bound in chains made not of metal but of despair, their flesh melding into grotesque pairs of bodies. Desperation had forged an alliance thicker than embodiment. There they merged, reality bending under their collective sorrow. The reflections of their hopelessness filled the air like smoke, weighing heavy on my heart. I recognized that feeling. It mirrored my own burgeoning terror, morphing and blending as it seeped into every crevice of my mind. Floating above them, just out of reach, hovered remnants of the artifact's shattered pieces, glistening with a malevolence of their own. They pulsed rhythmically, acting as beacons for the dark, and I realized with dawning horror that they would soon perform their ritual of transcendency, an act that would forever entwine me with this horrifying existence. Struggling against the binding darkness, I clawed my way back, longing for the orb of light I had so foolishly let slip away. Embrace your fate. The tumult echoed, jerking me from my reverie. I thrashed against the terrible surge, forcing my body to revive hope. But my attempts grew weaker as the shadows slithered over me, whispering sweet perseverance while mocking my fears and doubts. The moment hung in balance, teetering on the precipice of utter ruin, when the walls around me shuddered and a deep, resonating chant began. It rolled like thunder through the hollow chamber, vibrating through my bones, sending shockwaves of dread cascading over my skin. The words were ancient, enchanting yet ominous, a beckoning lullaby I could not resist. My vision blurred, the tether of my existence was unraveling. That I in the eye of the storm, I glimpsed the figure once more. It stood tall and regal, crowned by an otherworldly light. Its azure eyes pinned me in place, and once more it spoke, "You are my vessel. Accept what you truly are." The darkness writhed with increasing fervor around me, filling every possible void and coursing with a terrible hunger. Tendrils of shadow snaked down to reclaim me, each one infused with memories of loneliness and sorrow. The faces I had glimpsed before floated by like grotesque specters, their anguish etching deeper lines of panic into my heart. A chilling screech erupted from the shadow mass, stealing my breath and freezing every ounce of defiance within. "They are lost, and so shall you be." It bellowed, the sound a crumbling echo that reverberated in the very core of who I was. Suddenly, instinct pushed through my inertia. I could not be consumed by Thisno. With desperate resolve, I reached inside, yearning for the light that had once danced at my fingertips. But the shadows pulsed, a symphony of despair wrapping around my throat, whispering objections and sweet promises of belonging. Then, in a moment of stark clarity, I realized the truth. I was not a victim of this nightmare, I was becoming one with it, merging into the very horrors I had seen flash before my eyes. Breath-catching, I fought against the tendrils of darkness, feeling them falter and tremble as I summoned my last ounce of will. But before I could completely break free, a piercing scream erupted, reverberating through multiple planes of existence, followed by blinding light that flared with tenacity witnessed only in legends. I turned in confusion when the voices grew louder, morphing into an ascending crescendo, erupting into chaos. Just then, everything stopped, as if frozen in a moment that stretched into infinity. The shadows retreated, revealing a horizon filled with nightmarish creatures, once nameless souls now cloaked in the true form of their despair. Their cries morphed into a single, unified word as they raised bony fingers toward me, chanting a name that sent chills coursing down my spine. "Take her," and with that, a blinding flash erupted from within me, and I was spiraling into a void darker than the abyss, a space where time ceased to exist, where the weight of every sorrow laid heavy on my skin, and my scream faded into nothingness. As my consciousness began to dissolve into that void, a singular thought seared through. I was to become something else entirely, and my final choices remained hauntingly unmade. The silence enveloped me as I transitioned into that boundless void, yet the sensation of being watched licked at the edges of my consciousness. It made my skin crawl and my heart race, paranoia creeping in like roots of a malignant vine gripping the earth. Even in darkness, I could feel the presence of countless eyes, some glinting with malice, others shadowed with sympathy, as if mourning a fate they themselves had suffered. Time bled into a haze around me, a swirling miasma of memories and shadows blurring the lines between who I was and what I was becoming. The echoes of despair morphed into whispers that danced just beyond the grasp of understanding. "Join us, become more," they beckoned, each syllable punctuated by an icy caress that seeped into my bones. A sense of overwhelming longing tugged at my spirit, threatening to unravel my determination to resist. Suddenly, the looming weight of despair shifted, morphing into a pulse, a heartbeat that resonated through the darkness, quickening as if anticipating my submission. I fought against it with every ounce of resolve, but with each slap of my will against the specter of acceptance, it loomed larger, wrapping tendrils of fear tightly around my heart, a vice gripped by the claws of inevitability. Refuse and you shall remain a wisp, a mere shadow of a memory, the whispers cooed seductively, pressing against my mind like an insidious fog. My thoughts began to splinter, one moment seeking the light, the next reveling in the darkness that promised acceptance and power. Just when the pulse hit its crescendo, the void around me churned violently, and the darkness exploded into 1,000 notes of anxiety. I saw figures swirling amidst and above me, their faces contorted with pain, perpetuating the same cycle that I had witnessed in that cavern, despair feeding despair. They fought against the shadows, but their struggles only deepened the suffocating gloom, creating a vortex from which there was no escape. Then I noticed it, suspended amidst the chaotic ballet of souls, a glowing shard of the artifact that had once dominated my vision, a remnant of the light I craved. It shimmered defiantly, radiating clarity in the overwhelming murk, caught between dimensions yet beckoning to me. I reached for it, stretched my soul toward the sanctuary it seemed to promise, feeling a desperate heartbeat quicken in my chest, but the shadows were quicker. In an instant, they coiled around my arm, tugging me back with an agonizing war cry. You cannot escape what you already are. They screamed, laughter echoing as guttural moans morphed into raucous cackles, mocking my futile escape. Even then, I felt the flickers of despair within my grasp, an invitation into the depths of that horrific abyss, a sinister siren's song. As the cacophony of shadows and souls intermingled, the air thickened, electric with agonized energy, leaving trails of dread coating the insides of my throat. Each wailing plea became a dagger in my heart, the sound merging into a horrid harmony singing of eternal entrapment. I understood all too well that to grasp the light was to invite madness, to unleash a final, irrevocable curse. Yet, within me surged an instinctual rebellion, would not succumb to this fate. As despair began to twist my thoughts, I steeled my will and focused on the shard. No! I cried, my voice swallowed by the storm, but my spirit shone with stubborn defiance. I drew upon memories of laughter, warmth, and fleeting moments of joy, pushing against the overwhelming tides of darkness that in my desperation, I felt fragments of energy rippling around me, fissures of raw potential igniting along the edges of my being. With a deep breath that carried the whisper of hope, I yanked my arm free from the grasping shadows. Searing pain licked at my skin, yet I propelled myself towards clarity, towards that shard, feeling a surge of purpose radiate within. Euphoria burned bright, threatening to blind me against the engulfing shadows. My fingers grazed the surface of the shard, and in that instant, wavering lights and shapes coalesced around me, specters of joy, freedom, and strength calling out through the chaos. Claim what you are. They urged, their voices harmonizing in a symphony to rival the despair surrounding me. But just as I tapped into the light pulsing from the shard, the void convulsed violently once more, the tendrils of darkness writhing furiously, as though recoiling from the sudden surge of vibrancy. The shadows screamed, their malevolent rage cascading like tidal waves crashing against a dawning shore, determined to consume me whole. As the unnamable force clawed at my very essence, a shadowy figure emerged from the maelstrom, a grotesque silhouette threaded with pulsating ebony, adorned with dreadful eyes that glowed with an ancient hunger. You dared challenge the abyss. You will learn, mortal, that the darkness never relents. And in that moment, the world shattered around me in a dazzling explosion of light and shadow, leaving me suspended in a liminal space, my scream swallowed whole, teetering on the brink of sanity as I faced an unimaginable horror. The air grew heavier, pressing down on my lungs like an iron vice as I hovered on the edge of that exploding reality. In the churning chaos, I felt my body quiver, the sensation of being unmoored, untethered from the remaining phrase of self. The grotesque silhouette loomed ever closer, accompanied by the seething whispers from the shadows that enveloped it. You will witness the truth of what you crave, mortal. But beware, truths can unravel the mind. The figure's eyes glinted, alternating between the colors of remorse and an insatiable appetite for fear. Each heartbeat resonated within the void, a sickening reminder that time had lost its meaning here, an echo of futility that urged me to relinquish the struggle. "Is it not beautiful?" it intoned, voice smooth yet jagged, tinged with an intoxicating allure. "To belong to despair, to inhabit the solitude of eternal remembrance." Join us.as. The weight of those words sank into my consciousness. I felt the edges of my sanity fraying, each thread carefully plucked by calloused hands. Could surrender bring solace? My thoughts flickered violently, unsure of where the light lay. The shard felt warm against my fingertips, yet inexplicably distant, the weight of the silhouette's gaze stifling any flicker of hope. No. I would not be drawn into the abyss. With a roar born of remnants of resolve, I thrust the shard outward, forcing it against the surge of shadows. The light exploded forth, a blinding pulse that carved a fissure through the dark. A cacophony of anguished wails erupted around me as I felt the shadows recoil, disoriented by the sudden onslaught of brilliance, but the grotesque figure merely widened its ghastly grin, eyes igniting with a malicious glee. "You think mere light can banish me?" it taunted, advancing through the radiant glow, untouched and unyielding. The brightness waned as it drew near, like the dimming of a wavering candle threatened by an encroaching storm. I grasped the shard tightly, defiance ringing within my core. I knew I had only moments before it would extinguish the dim flame of hope I clung to. As I prepared to unleash another wave of energy, I was suddenly beset by a deeper horror roar swept through the void, a guttural sound that echoed with the weight of ages. The darkness began to shift rhythmically, pulsating as if it had a life of its own, bending and trading places with the specters of lost souls. They emerged from the darkened waves, spinning, howling, eyes wide with anguish. An unearthly ballet that illustrated the stories of their torment, and amongst them, I recognized a familiar face, one that had slipped from memory yet returned with a vengeance. It was my sister, her features blurred but her eyes hauntingly vivid, mirroring the depths of despair I'd barely escaped. "Help us, please!" she cried, her voice fractured, resonating amidst the maelstrom. "You must understand. There's no turning back." Her anguish cut through me like a knife, thoughts racing with a horrific urgency. I had watched her suffer and mourn, lingering in the shadows since the moment I had lost her to this wretched place. The darkness beckoned for me to join her, whispering false promises of reunion. "You belong to us. We are family," it cooed, the grotesque figure watching with unholy glee as my resolve began to tremble. No. I screamed, heart pounding, grasping for the last vestiges of clarity. I needed to save her. I needed to save myself. Shaking my head, I stepped back, holding the glimmering shard aloft. "You're not real. You're part of the darkness. I won't let you take me." As if powered by my words, the shard flared once more, vibrant tendrils of light spiraling enchantingly around me, drawing in the lingering despair that clung to the void like an obsessive lover. The shadows writhed and howled, drawn to the radiance like moths to a flame, yet the figure only cackled louder, the noise morphing into a chorus of twisted laughter. Do you not see, coward? You awaken the extent of your own fear. This is no simple horror. You have already chosen. The air thickened, and what I had thought was laughter morphed into something infinitely worse, whispering panic that seeped into my skin, curling around my thoughts, altering my perception. Suddenly, the scene shifted, dramatically ripping the world from under my feet. My sister, woven into the fabric of that anguished wailing that burrowed deeper into the grave of sorrow, was pulled back into the inky depths, her face contorting in agony, pleading for release. "No. I won't let you take her," I shouted, lunging forward, but the shadows slammed shut around her, sealing her torment as the figure stepped even closer, its breath hot against my cheek. "You have already lost." The darkness twisted into grotesque shapes, unheard cries of the damned coiling upward, filling the air with a sickening sweetness that gnawed at the edges of consciousness. I was faced with an impossible choice, the power of light dwindling against the encroaching shadows, despair weighing down my heart as dread wrapped around my mind like venomous vines, and then, a jolting revelation crashed through me, stirring the depths of my soul. To save her, to save myself, I could not merely resist. I had to confront the horror. In that moment of terrifying surrender, the shards of reality shattered not just around me, but within me. As I turned back toward the grotesque figure, the familiar flicker of raging defiance igniting in my chest, I made the realization that in order to truly wield power, I would first have to embrace the darkest corners of my own being. With a defiant roar, I plunged into the shadows, feeling the cold clench of the abyss close around me, pulled into a realm of absolute darkness, where unspeakable truths awaited. The moment I succumbed to the shadows, a chill enveloped my essence, wrapping around me like an ancient shroud. In that profound darkness, there was no distinction between self and void, everything merged into a grotesque tapestry woven of wails and despair. Each breath I took whispered of secrets long forgotten, of horrors that lay hidden beneath the surface of reality. I was no longer just an observer, I was now part and parcel of this forsaken existence. As I drifted deeper, the familiar ache of loss carved through me, thrumming with an unsettling resonance that felt all too close. Ghostly figures flitted through the gloom, their features shifting and changing before my eyes, a kaleidoscope of forgotten faces, of moments suspended in perpetual grief. What haunted expressions they bore! The shadows cycled through them, each embodying a tale of torment, each whispering my name, seeking recognition. Help us! They sang in hypnotic unison, a cacophony of torment intertwining. I turned, bewildered, grasping at their fleeting visages. You can't save them, a voice dripped like rancid honey in the back of my mind, because they are merely reflections of your past, echoes of a mortality long since devoured by darkness. Despair coiled like a serpent, its tail tightening around my heart as the multitude of voices surged around me, dragging me down into the depths of my own buried fears. I saw again my sister, trapped in a maw of swirling despair, her eyes pleading with a mix of love and sorrow. Is this the path you choose? The grotesque figure reappeared at the edge of my consciousness, rising like a specter from the black mist, its form pulsating at the edges, growing more solid with every agonizing heartbeat. You seek to understand, to wrestle with horrors that mold you. But what if I told you those horrors are your truest self? As it spoke, the shadows surged, rising like a tempest, and for a brief moment, the tortured souls shimmered with an ethereal glow. Their despair converted into something deeper, suffering woven with threads of acceptance. In this interlude, I felt a surge of warmth, as if the darkness was revealing something fundamentally beautiful yet terrifying. With each moment, understanding rose within me, gnawing and relentless. To wield power over one's fear, one must embrace the truth lurking beneath the surface. In an instant, I was hit with an overwhelming memory of my own life, proud moments interspersed with guilt and shame, desires entangled in grief, a dichotomy of existence neither light nor dark, but an unsolvable puzzle of human fragility. It was then that I realized the grotesque figure was not merely an antagonist, it was a reflection of my own self, manifesting my deepest resentments and loss, each twisted feature mirroring pieces of me that I had long buried. But I also saw something more, the flicker of resilience, of a spirit that refused to be snuffed out. It burned within me, and against the tide of shadows drawing toward the grotesque figure, I roared with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. You are not me. Energy erupted from my core, illuminating the shadows around, piercing through the sorrowful forms that spun in agony. For the first time, I took a step forward, feeling the shards of reality crackle beneath my feet. They felt fragile, yet potent with purpose, a connection to all those I had lost, reminding me of love rather than despair. The figure faltered, its expression twisting into anger, the vivid glow of my defiance threatening to shatter its malevolent hold. You resist what you truly are. You cannot hide from your essence. It shrieked, the harmony of tortured souls around me growing frantic, their cries a twisted symphony that clawed at my mind. Then, without warning, the darkness erupted forward, surging like liquid smoke intent on swallowing me whole. I could sense the figures frantically reaching out, their whispers warping into sinister warnings and pleading calls to succumb. It felt like drowning within a tide of memories and guilt, yet, I pushed back, summoning the strength from every moment of pain, every drop of anguish. No. I choose who I want to be. I am not the darkness, but I am forged from it. You cannot claim what was never yours, the grotesque figure lurched backward, its eyes wide with fear and fury. It thrashed as if realizing its own vulnerability for the first time, the shadows trembling at the edges in response to my defiance. But just as clarity blossomed within the chaos, a piercing shriek erupted from the depths, a voice that was unmistakably my sister's, reverberating with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. "Help us. We need your help. It's not over." And then, just as suddenly, the realm twisted violently, as if reality itself shuddered in response to her plea. I felt the weight of time obliterate as the shadows clawed at me, a cyclone born of despair spiraling toward an unimaginable climax. I glanced back at the grotesque figure, no longer merely a monstrous specter, but now a despair-riddled reflection of countless dark corners within. I had just glimpsed salvation, yet now, all around me swirled the agony of my sister and countless others, begging for release as the darkness closed in. More desperate than ever, with heart racing and breath hitching in my throat, I braced myself as light and darkness collided in a cataclysmic clash. But then, just as the last remnants of hope flickered, the shadows pulled back, revealing a gateway I hadn't noticed before, a crack lying at my feet. The familiar, distorted echo of my sister's voice called me from the other side, just beyond reach. "Choose." And with that single word echoing in the void, the ground trembled beneath me, and I found myself falling. Desperate, grasping at the surging whispers, I hurtled into the abyss of my own making. I awoke, gasping, on a damp, stone floor that was slick with moisture and something vile. The air was thick and suffocating, a miasma swirling with an oppressive silence that pressed against my chest, halting my breath. Confusion gripped me as I struggled to comprehend my surroundings. The last fragments of that nightmarish encounter flickered through my mind like ghosts: my sister's voice, the grotesque figure, the shadows spiraling like a cyclone of despair. That I pulled myself up against the wall, equally trembling and nauseous. The world felt disjointed, reality melted into pieces. I was in a chamber, barely illuminated by flickering torches mounted on crumbling, damp walls. My heart hammered in my chest, the silence echoing like a mocking reminder of the torment I had just faced. Me sister, the artifact, the darkness that clung like an inescapable shroud. That it was then that I felt a familiar voice, a whisper barely brushing my mind. "You shouldn't have come back." The chilling resonance of those words unfurled dread deep within my bones. As I turned toward the shadowed corner of the chamber, I felt the cold clutch of something more than just memory. A figure emerged from the dark, its eyes radiant like beacons, filled with equal measures of sorrow and malice. A face I knew all too well, yet one I didn't recognize, mine.no. The reflection before me shimmered, it morphed, swirling with elements of guilt and envy, each detail sculpted from darkness's deepest fears, the very essence of my despair brought to life in the form of another self. I stumbled backward, the undeniable truth crashing over me with sickening clarity. "You are trapped in an eternal cycle, dear sister," the figure crooned, its voice a doppelganger of my own, twisted with darkness. "You have awakened what you sought to bury. You fought against your own essence, only to return here only to become one with it." That it gestured around the chamber, and I realized, with horror, that this was not merely a place of refuge, it was the threshold of every choice I had made, every moment I had abandoned for safety in the light. The walls trembled, whispering secrets of countless souls, fragmented memories swirling against the surface. My sister's face flickered once more among the shadows, pleading with me through the veil of darkness, her eyes pleading, but sinking deep into the hollow darkness below. That I gasped, lunging forward instinctively, desperate to find her, but the self before me barred my way. "You think you can save her?" It laughed, a haunting melody layered with my own despair. "You cannot escape what flows through your veins. You are the darkness now, forged in the crucible of fear and loss. You bound yourself to it, willingly.no." I screamed, my voice cracking against the oppressive weight of realization. The figure stepped forward, its presence suffocating as it mirrored every broken piece of me. "You fought valiantly, but every step you took brought you closer, and now, you find yourself once again at the door. Only it is no longer an escape, it is your fate. Join us in an instant." The air shifted, the whispers grew chaotic, invading my mind like dark ivy. Memories clawed their way to the surface, each one intertwined with the last. The faces of those I had loved, each one twisted with fear and anger, beckoning through the shadows, shocked and distant. You chose this, the reflection of me taunted, its eyes glinting with wicked exhilaration. Step into the dark for your sister, and join the others. Accept your fate. You'll be free to share in the torment that binds us all. That sickening unease spiraled within me as I stumbled back, grappling with reality. No. I shouted again, resolve battling against consuming dread. I swayed between two worlds, one of light where I was too late to save my sister, and one of shadows where trauma entwined with darkness, and then, realization struck like thunder, a clarity amid chaos. I had not truly escaped, I merely emerged to confront it head-on. I had the power, not to flee or fight, but to confront what haunted meth remnants of my essence that had grown powerful through decay and despair. With explosive vitality, I reached out, letting my spirit envelope the terrifying self that stood before me. You are me, and I am you, but I have chosen a different path, a path woven through love rather than despair. I let that thought fracture the constricting darkness, a beacon flickering with defiance in the face of overwhelming dread. In that moment, the chamber exploded into a maelstrom of color, where light and dark clashed violently, ripping at the fabric of our existence. As the darkness swirled around me, threatening to consume me whole, I screamed for my sister, her name now a thread woven through the air that bound us together, anchoring me to hope amid the chaos. The shadows shrieked, detaching from the vision of the other me, as I could feel the choice of my own reality tip dangerously toward freedom. You cannot take what I choose, I declared, tears flowing as my voice rose in pitch, fueled with the fear of not knowing where the darkness began and I ended. The rift split further, and for a heartbeat, I glimpsed my sister again, her form rising from the darkness, eyes blazing with fierce determination and love that drove me forward. You can't save me, she cried, her voice wrenching within me, yet I never felt more free. You can only save yourself. This is not the end. I grasped onto that truth with every ounce of my being, pushing back against the onslaught of despair that threatened to rip away everything I had fought to reclaim. I am not running. I am standing. I roared, letting the fractured light cascade from within, letting it pierce through every shadow that loomed nearby. The dark figure wailed and twisted, its grip slackening, shadows rushing against the radiant light that formed a shield around me. I spun toward my sister, forcing the memories of laughter and joy to envelop her haunted expression, held fast by the light growing larger and larger within Muntal. With one final surge, I shattered the darkness entirely. As the shadows peeled away, light flooded the chamber, cleansing infection that had followed me through the night. All fear, all anguish transformed into luminous energy bursting through the space, like seeds igniting into flames of unreal vitality. I gasped as I caught my breath, knowing I was free. The weight pressed against my heart lifted entirely, leaving only the sweet taste of remembered love, but just as I turned to clasp my sister's hand to pull her back from the brink, a chill settled upon my skin, slinking through the tendrils of brightness, lingering like a murmur behind me. A blinding darkness still lurked, curling around unnoticed shadows, looming over in wait. You think you are free, the echo sliced through the light, insidious as it slithered through the cracks, vibrating against my soul. I turned slowly, one last gasp escaping my lips as I caught the reflection of my own self against the skeletal walls of this forsaken chamber. Only this time, I was not alone. Fragments of shadow clung to me, a weaving of many moments, faces flushed with fear and twisted with despair. They danced delicately at the fringes, whispering promises of returning to the shadows I had faced. Shadows I could not run from. And as I gazed into the very heart of darkness, I recognized the truth that resonated relentlessly through my being: I could never truly escape what connected me to all of it. What remained whispered continuously, rippling through the silence. The moment I let go, it would still linger, watching, waiting, for a time when darkness itself would need me again.